one of many killers in the Apple Cup, missed opportunities.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Go to 5hourenergy.com and use promo code LOCKDOWNCFB to receive 20% off your order. Lars, we got a really somewhat fun show today as we're still, reeling after having to sit through that Apple Cup loss on Saturday afternoon inside Lumen Field. We're going to get into a few positives because, as overwhelmingly negative as this game was, we can find one or two things that were on the nice side of things. We're going to talk about the adjustments that need to be made. But we need to start with one thing we didn't really get to because it wasn't necessarily the most glaring with the penalties and the horrible play calling. Those missed opportunities because, Lars, they were everywhere on Saturday.
Yeah, they were. And I mean, on one hand, again, we didn't dive deeper into it because, again, the penalties and everything were what led to missed opportunities. But in a way, you could take out the penalties and there's just still missed opportunities throughout the game with respect to, how Jedd handled the play calling, some things that were done. Here's one thing we did address this, but I do want to address this one more time because I think it's important. And speaking of missed opportunities, and I don't think you do either, fault Denzel Boston for not getting in on that catch.
He wasn't going to get in.
Because speaking of seeing a lot of things on after the game, that's one thing I saw way too much of. If Denzel reaches out for that, maybe he crosses the pylon, maybe. But to question Denzel's heart in that, to me, was not the result there. The missed opportunities came with the play calling in the first half, the play calling on some of the third quarter drives. And then you talk about, the third down defense not being able to get off the field a couple of times, penalties on defense that end up, resulting in touchdowns or extended drives. And it was kind of just a calamity of wrong place, wrong time. And then when you do have the right time, you don't have the right plays in mind to execute an offense. And that was just the case of the day.
Right. So there's one instance in particular that I'm somewhat shocked we didn't mention yesterday. And, it's as you said, Lars, there were other things that kind of took priority, and it was the missed field goal from 26 yards out. And yeah, that put Washington in a really bad spot, like field position wise, and you got to go 92 yards to get a touchdown. I get that, but it just, that felt like a really big point in the game that we didn't really spend enough time on yesterday. We wanted to make sure we talked about it, where when I look at that, I see, oh yeah, Washington had an opportunity here to make a play. They had an opportunity there. Like the Thaddeus Dixon one is another one we'll get to, where I look at different opportunities like that, where penalties or not, you have plenty of opportunities to find ways to make plays. Where Giles Jackson was winning at all three levels of the field. Opportunities dialed up, more shot plays there. Jonah Coleman had, I don't want to say enough touches, but he looked good for the most part, especially on a couple of those runs. There are opportunities to get the ball into his hands a little bit more. Man, I look at that particular drive where I think that's when everything really started to just kind of be like, oh, this is not pretty.
And what happened on that drive? What was the issue on that drive? I'll tell you if you can't think of it. No,
it wasn't penalties.
It's the abbreviated when you said Apple cost. It's accosting Jedd Fisch for what he did on that drive. You brought in Damon Williams for no reason whatsoever. Yeah. That was what buzzkilled the entire drive because and here's the thing, Will scrambled for 17 on the first play of the drive. Will got you the legs. It wasn't like Will was winded or Will took a shot on that play or anything like that.
I want to clarify one thing you said there. Neither of us are opposed to Damon playing. Neither of us are opposed to that in any stretch of the imagination. But you're right. It's more of just like a game flow sort of thing where if you want to run with a package for him, fine. Where we saw it work. We saw it work at several different points in time where obviously we know why Damon is coming into the game. We know that he's a really mobile quarterback who brings just a fantastic threat with his legs as well as his arm. But at that point in the field, I certainly understand what you're saying. I'm sorry. I know you have more there. That's just one thing where I get your point, and I think that, yeah, especially with Will, who completed 74% of his passes, like it's not like outside of the sacks he was bad at any stretch of the imagination.
And you're winning the game at that point. Even if Janikowski makes the field goal, the game is now tied. You have, because again, I'm glad you mentioned, yeah, I've been driving the Damon is going to play in more than 6 games trained for the entire season. I'm not mad that Damon got in the game. I do agree there's a way to get him in the game. That ain't it. And especially when you look at it was, I think, 2nd and 2 when Damon came in. I'm looking at it right now. It was, Damon came in on 2nd and 2. Joe does a run, and then you get 3rd and 3, and then the check down to Cohen for 1 yard was, and I'm like, if you're gonna keep Damon, if you're gonna bring Damon in to run, and you're gonna do that, that's fine. It was okay. Now you're gonna have Damon pass and do a check down to Jonah that Will could execute, and I'm not saying the execution was on Damon for that one because I think it's just setting up the offense. And to be fair, Walsh did kind of blow up that play on defense. So there wasn't a ton that Jonah might have got on either way. But it speaks to, as you said, the flow of the game. Do that in the 3rd quarter. Or, you know what? Let Damon start the drive. Let him do a whole drive. Sure. Because, again, what Jedd said after the game was that bringing Damon in their mind, means you have another gap to account for. Okay, that checks out. That does. Because, again, hell of an athlete, can scramble for days. But at that point in the game, when you're ahead, if you're down 13-0, sure, go for it. Throw them on in there. I need something. Any kind of spark. That checks out. What doesn't check out is you have a 3-point lead, the ball near midfield with about 9 minutes left in the 2nd quarter, and then, or 8 minutes, whatever it was, then in the 2nd quarter, and then you bring him in. This wasn't an end of quarter drive, which they did towards the end of the first half when Damon came in for a couple more plays and scrambled and did what we thought he would do. That is fine. But at that point in the game, because then you look at it, it's a short drive. It's a 1, 2, 3, 4 play drive, not kind of the punt.
Right.
And then what happens on the following drive? Walsh scores a touchdown.
And that touchdown is frustrating enough. But I want to, because we didn't even talk about the 4th down stop they had earlier in the game, where like that's another thing that I wanted to get to. But I need to spend a minute on the interception here, where that interception felt like the turning point. It felt like, oh, they've played so undisciplined. There have been so many mistakes up to this point, but you get that interception on just really poorly thrown ball, and all of a sudden you think, oh, there's momentum. There are things that are trending in the right direction. All of a sudden you have a chance to get right. And then from that point on, 3-yard gain. You get Jonah's big run for 13 yards. And then immediately the sack with the intentional grounding on top of it. Giles Jackson gets 8 yards, but it's still 3rd and 14. And Rashid Williams gets 8 yards, 4th and 6, penalty, and you need to punt. That at that point in the game is just inexcusable. And that's, just the way that the play worked out with Will rolling out to the right with all his routes going on the left side. Like it's frustrating to see.
That's the 3rd time this season that's happened in 3 games. That's the 3rd time Will has scrambled out to the right, had nothing, and got sacked. And the first 2 times it happened, Jedd was like, yeah, Will shouldn't have taken a sack, though. It was a bad sack. It's a bad play call. Why is now again, I'm not a novice here at football, so I understand you can roll right, have everything break back to the right at that point. But it just seems like this is a lot of coaching, not now practice, but malign questioning. I don't know. It's
very questionable.
Yeah, it's like it's not atrocious. Yeah, but it's if we continue on this track, it's going to be like this trend needs to stop right now, which leads into the 2nd segment.
Perfect. Yep. There's so many adjustments that need to be made. So many. Which we'll get to right after a message from our friends over at 5 Hour Energy, because 5 Hour Energy is great for so many different times a day. Like, you should just take one before your workout, because if you want to get in shape and have trouble staying motivated, you should make 5 Hour Energy shots part of your lifestyle and get the energy boost you need to get fit. We all know you sometimes don't want to go to the gym. Take a 5 Hour Energy shot to give you the feeling and alertness you need to get to the gym, because 5 Hour Energy is the brand that hardworking people like you have trusted for over 20 years to give them the alert, energized feeling they need to get through a busy, hectic day. You always know where to find 5 Hour Energy shots right at the cash register at nearly every convenience, drug, and grocery store nationwide. And you can stock up on money-saving multi-packs to make sure you never run out of delicious, energizing 5 Hour Energy shots. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5 Hour Energy product today, you can use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. This code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. So, Lars, when we look at all the adjustments that need to be made, penalties, I mean, yeah, that's number one for sure. But just in terms of schematics, game plan, penalties, specifics, what's the number one thing that stands out to you?
I mean, I think so. For me, it's not necessarily an adjustment; it's a decision. So I guess in a way, it's an adjustment. I need identity, because it's what we talked about before the show. I'm not sure there's an identity, like a true identity on this offense. Now, I think we both can identify a couple. You have Jonah Coleman and Cam Davis, two battering rams, two guys that can easily, have been there, done that, can handle the load. Problem is with that, are you confident in your offensive line? I don't think so. So now that's the other question. Can you adjust the offensive line enough to where, I mean, I don't know if it's adjustments or coaching, because part of it, I mean, I don't think the scheme was necessarily the issue. I think a mixture of both. It's probably the accurate answer here, because it's not just the scheme and it's not just the players executing the calls. It's a mixture of both, because I think it's a matter of getting on the same page. This offense doesn't seem like it's on the same page right now.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And, the one thing that I really wanted to single out right here off the top is Jeremiah Hunter, where it's not his fault, but where is he? Like 5 for 72 and a touchdown last week, which is great. And we look at it and say, oh, great. He's back on the right track. Everything looks like it's trending in the right direction. Awesome. Then he goes 2 for 21 in the Apple Cup, when, there were a couple plays where I just decided to watch him, just see what was going on over there. And he was getting open. He was consistently winning and consistently finding ways to, just find a soft spot or beat man coverage, whatever it was. But the ball just wasn't coming his way, which was really, really frustrating to see, because this is a guy where, not only did he come here to be part of the productive offense and just find different ways to succeed on his way to the NFL, because he certainly looks like an NFL receiver, but just the fact that he just hasn't been super involved is really frustrating to see. And they need to find a way to rectify that.
Yeah, well, it's why did you bring him in like that? I mean, I guess you didn't technically bring him. Well, you did. We've been over that story.
Yeah.
Cummings said, yeah, if you still want to come, you can come. But again, it kind of speaks to what I was saying, is there's no plan. It's like FIFA. It's a terrible example, but it's like FIFA. You get all these like great elite players on your team. That's great. You got a bunch of talent, but can you bring them together and coach them and utilize them in the way that they need to be? That's why I say, what's your identity? You have 3A receivers: Denzel, Jeremiah, Giles checking the box, Denzel doing his job. It's not like Jeremiah's not getting open. They're running a lot of 2 receiver sets, and it's Giles and Denzel. There's no Jeremiah. Jeremiah's not even out there, and he's not hurt.
That's something I don't understand. I don't. Where he's a fantastic run blocker too.
And here's the thing: if you're gonna say, okay, well, we're not a passing team, we're a running team, then commit to the run. You're not. Yeah. You're not doing either of the two. You're doing 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Like it's invigorating, because what we saw from this team in fall camp, it's like we saw how many times they would run the ball 4, 5, 6, 7 plays in a row. It's like, okay, cool. Will might just be a game manager for all intents and purposes. Great, because you have a lot of these guys who can run block and can run pretty well. Adam Mohammed, Jonah Coleman, Cam Davis, Sam Adams, however many guys you want to throw in that mix, because you have arguably more running backs than you do receivers, if you want to boil down to it. Okay,
no,
then run the ball.
These guys you trust,
and then run the ball. And you didn't do that. Now, again, part of it in this game, at watching back again, take my alumni status out of it. Wazoo won the front 7 battle. Wazoo won the trenches battle. That is without question. And to me, that's also kind of an indictment, because when you go back and look at the PFF grades, Enoch played every snap at right guard. Drew played every snap at right tackle. Sewanee played most of the snaps at left tackle, and Guard played most of the snaps at left guard. And D'Angelo was mostly the center as well. So it was the same guys. There wasn't a ton of rotation, so it wasn't like, oh, hey, now we got to switch out a bunch of different units and guys aren't getting into the game flow. That even wasn't the question. It was just, okay, these are the guys we're going with. They're getting beat off the ball. Maybe scheme some things open. I don't think scheming an option pitch is the move on that one to fix some picture blocking woes, but whatever the case was, that I think is the adjustment, is finding the offensive line that can win. Because, I mean, Enoch graded out 86 in pass blocking, but everybody else, I mean, the run grades, Jesus, that was you don't want to see the run grades for this week. I'll just tell you that much.
And that's just a really frustrating thing, where when you have Jonah, who still, finds a way to fight through contact and still, picks up 70 yards. Like, if you want to take his long run out of it, just in terms of, to fit an agenda or just talk about everything else, like, it's fine. I get it. But it's just really frustrating to see that. And, whatever the plan is at left tackle going forward, fine. Just stick to it, figure it out. Where I think we're still going to see some rotation with Landon at center or left guard or right guard, wherever he ends up fitting in. And we'll still see some rotation between Sewanee and Max. And, obviously Sewanee was able to come back after getting hurt early on, which is nice to see. And it still feels like they're trying to figure out whatever that's going to be. But it's, as you said, Lars, it's establish the identity. Whatever it's going to be, just do it now. Because that's not going to fly when you really get into Big Ten play. Like, after this Northwestern game, like, the next home game is Michigan. That's not going to fly against Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. It's not. It's just straight up not. But when we need to talk about the other side of the ball here. Because, Lars, I'm going to be honest. Outside of a couple plays, I really didn't have an issue with the defensive play calling, personally. Where, like, the more I go back and I look at it, the more I say, yeah, the touchdowns were just awful. Like, the two rushing touchdowns were awful. Where, as we said on the postgame show, both came out of cover zero, where there's no spy and Mateer is able to escape and just do whatever he wants. That cannot happen again. I feel like it won't, but that can't happen again. And then on top of that, like, the one thing that I think needed to be adjusted on the defensive side was kind of exactly what I talked about the entire week leading up to the game, where I said all day, this defense is going to give you one thing. They say, we dare you, and we're going to be okay if you beat us this way. And it was that underneath, that stop, that comeback route where, there's a lot of off coverage, and all of a sudden, whoever it was, Prysock, Dixon, Shaw, McCutcheon, Jackson, whoever it was, all of those guys were sitting on it. It was very clear, keep it in front of you. If they want this, let them take it. Some tackling was not great on all of those, but it was very clear that's how they were going to let Wazoo beat them. And the frustrating thing was the tackles were not always made by the first guy, which was a problem.
Yeah, and kind of in a way, it's something that Washington's defense has struggled with in years past. To just, one guy can get there. And the thing is, with Washington's defense in years past, and this year especially, you can't just rely on one guy. You can't just rely on Zoe. You can't just rely on Carson to be the guy getting 12, 13, 14 tackles. It has to be everybody. And that was the problem. But going back to that, I don't disagree with your play calling thing, because I think the defensive play calling was fine, and defense did what it could. It seemed like they were out there more than the offense was, just based on how many short drives the offense had.
Gassed by the end of it, yeah.
But at the same point, you look at the time of possession, it was about equal. So it wasn't like you're talking 6-7 minutes of difference, but it felt, just like Jay Ticker told me, Jonah Coleman felt like he ran for 120, only ran for 75. So there's a lot of, it feels good. The problem is, though, those two plays accounted for 14 points. You take out one of those, you're in better position. You take out both, you win the game. Now, that's a hard angle to take, but again, that's the fine line margin that you have. Like, Steve Belichick did everything great. Third and long. Great, that's a great lead-in. But then the follow-up play is 2 touchdowns. That's not a good thing. So I honestly am more confident in Steve getting the defense right than I do Jay getting the offense right.
I would certainly agree with you there, where Steve, just in terms of what his track record is and everything that we've seen from what his defense was for 5 years, where Yeah, for sure. Like what was the stat I gave on one of the shows last week when I said quarterbacks have gone over what number in rushing yards?
45.
60. Yeah, it was 45. But the number that all those numbers, it was 45. But the number that all those guys hit was 60. All those guys at 60 yards. And John Mateer at 62. And that's something where I think that, Steve's going to learn from it. He's going to have to do it quickly. And the thing that sucks to talk about, especially before we talk to Jedd Fisch, is Carson Bruner, where we'll see what happens. Where he came off late, he ran off the field, and then it looked like he didn't return at some point. I didn't see it personally, but it looked like he went back to the locker room at some point. Please, if you have something, go for it.
So it looked like either the trainers told Carson you're done, and he looked dejected, or the injury snapped in worse. And that's when he went to the locker room because he didn't come back in the game. That I remember because I remember looking out on my binoculars on the sideline, and I'm like, "Oh, Carson's cooked. This ain't good." Like he was in some serious upper body pain, is how I would describe it. I don't want to say what part of the body, but it's upper body. So it's not knee, leg, foot, ankle. But it looks significant enough to where he should not have returned in that game.
So that's something that we'll certainly get an update from Jedd Fisch at some point on Monday about that. But that's something where, the reason I bring that up is with or without him in this next game against Northwestern, you need to find a way to make sure that those adjustments are made against a running quarterback. And actually that will lead into one of my biggest positives, which we'll get to right after a message from our friends over at FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you today. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a free 3-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon at a market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. And, like I said last week on this show, in this segment, you got to take the Seahawks over the Patriots. Watching that one play out was not shocking at all to this guy right here. So I'm feeling good about the Seahawks this year. And with the way the Niners looked against the Vikings, I think the Seahawks might have a real shot at the division. And you should go check out their odds on FanDuel. So Lars, one of my biggest positives from the Apple Cup was Khmori House. Khmori House looked like a star. I was so impressed with him in every aspect of the game. He got the start. He lined up on the edge a lot. He walked down into the slot. He played, technically just in alignment in nickel corner a couple times. They lined him up inside. He spied John Mateer a couple of times. There were times where he was the backside defender that came and crashed on the edge. He looked really nice doing that. Even, he didn't necessarily set a hard edge, but when the runs came his way, he was tied for the team leading tackles. He had 5 tackles. It was him and Alfonso Tuputala that tied for the lead.
That's why I had Jedd about it after the game. I was like, hey, Khmori? Like it, and it seemed from very on early from the first, as you mentioned, he got the start. And in that, it was like, okay, when you're looking at the defensive setups, like, okay, now you see why Khmori's here, because he lined up in the slot a couple of times. Only allowed 1 catch. Granted, 1 target, 1 catch, but 21 yards. No yards after contact. That's a good sign. That automatically, we're talking about missed tackles and guys not doing their job. Yeah, you don't like that you gave up 21, but freshman linebacker playing in the slot, I'm not particularly worried about that. I'm worried about the yards after contact. And then you look at total snap count, more than doubled from Eastern Michigan to Washington State. So that tells me Khmori's gonna, and Khmori was the guy we said in fall camp was going to be a guy, like a guy that was probably going to play maybe on special teams, get some reserve snaps. And I think it tells you, right, where he also starts. Exactly. And I think Khmori's been a guy because he was the guy that came in the spring. So he was one of the early guys. And I think we're starting to see that trend continue. They're only one of the few trends continuing is guys that came in early are playing. Guys that came in April and May are playing. Guys that came in May and June. If you're veterans, you're playing. If you're not a veteran, you're trying to fight for your time a little bit more, which is fair.
But I will say, in fairness, we've seen a couple of those guys play. Like one of them who we saw in the first couple of games that was injured and didn't play against Wazoo is Raheem Wright, where I've actually been really impressed with him too. But yeah, no, your point is still valid. That's just one guy who, in particular, I wanted to mention just because I really like what I've seen from him.
Well, and Jaden Wayne. Jaden Wayne got in the Apple Cup as a redshirt. So again, they're not saying that the guys that came in the summer are not playing, but I'm just saying
I was more talking about the 2024 class. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Why Khmori is playing, and he's I think from that versatile linebacker spot, it's exactly what we said he was going to be this season. It's a guy that can cover in space, is not afraid to come up and make a tackle, and he was playing right at the line. And the one thing that I liked about Khmori, there wasn't a penalty on him. He didn't jump. He didn't make a missed assignment. He didn't have a true error in that regard. And as a freshman, that's massive. One guy that also didn't have an error, again, king of the agenda pushing here, Giles Jackson.
Yeah, that's right.
How on earth did Giles not get 9 for 9 for 2 more yards? He had 162. Give him 164, Jedd. Come on. No, but to me, that's kind of the criminal nature of this is we're talking about an offense that can't find an identity. The pass from Will Rogers to Giles for 45 that Will got, I think, hit on that play. Either way, he had to release it and basically just threw up a prayer. And John Ross, a.k.a. Giles Jackson, looked up like, oh, I got to make an adjustment here. I'm not saying John and Giles are the same speed. But it was the same sort of, hey, Jake's going to throw it up, and about 5 seconds later, you're going to go try and play center field and catch the ball. And Giles did. Giles honestly probably should have had 12 catches today in the Apple Cup. He again was open in the flat that Will missed him on, and there was wide open in the flat. Like it was. But here's the thing: Giles didn't complain. You didn't see Giles, having one of those wide receiver diva moments, saying, "Hey, come on, I'm the only one producing here aside from Denzel. Give me the ball." But it's almost like, okay, he's being such a good soldier and such a good teammate. Why does he not get that last target? The one positive, that's what I asked Jedd after the game. Giles Jackson, only positive today?
Yeah. Well,
and he's like, I was going to get Giles the ball, and I decided not to. And I'm like, oh, that's on you then.
I wouldn't say only. We're one guy who is very limited, but man, does he look like a star every time he touches the ball. Another 2024 guy. Yeah, it's Adam Mohammed. Or that first play, like that veer that he took where he just did it wasn't the full Kenneth Walker, he threw him to the ground, but just the way that he was able to just look so physical as a true freshman. That one, and then a little bit later on, one of those other runs, I know our guy Ben Glassmeyer pointed out on Twitter where he made the wrong read on one of his runs where it looked like he could have followed his blockers and possibly picked up more yards. But he still, because he ran into the back of one of his offensive linemen, I think it was guard Memolar, ran into somebody's back and then still was able to bounce around him and pick up 3, 4, 5 yards in that play. Watching him run is so impressive, man. Week in and week out where, I didn't want to correct you earlier when you're talking about this Jonah Coleman, Cam Davis duo, because Adam Mohammed in that game and every single time he touches the ball, he just looks like he should get more carries. And the thing is, he can't usurp either of those other two guys. Like, that's the thing. Like, he shouldn't. Where he's very talented, but with both of those guys being upperclassmen, being as experienced and talented as they are, he's not going to, unless there's an injury, which, we're not even going to discuss. But every time I watch Adam, I just say, that dude's going to be a star. And even Jedd Fisch said it. He said, yeah, I want to see more of him too. But again, that's what he acknowledged. He said, there's so many other guys in this room. It's hard to do that. It's hard to get him the ball more. But every time I watch him, I just can't help but smile and think about what that's going to look like next year and the year after.
You're absolutely right. But here's the thing. It's not hard to get him the ball. And it's not hard to have Adam Mohammed not usurp those two. You just hand him all the ball. Pick an identity.
But that's the thing, though. No, you're right. You're right. But that's the thing, though. If you're going to run the ball 35 times a game, I mean this with all due respect, you're not going to give him 10 or 15 carries. And it's not because of who he is. It's because of the guys in front of him.
No, but I'm saying you can give Jonah 10, 15.
Sure.
Cam 5 to 10. Adam 5 to 10. No, I'm just saying you can still break it out to where if you're getting 35, Adam can still have 5 to 7 carries and still get 60 yards. Like there's still plenty of. We saw again, albeit Weber State. he can still do a lot with those carries. And so you don't have to make Adam Jonah your 1-2. You don't have to make, Cam
but that's kind of the thing though. But see, even then, I don't think that's what it is. Where when I look at it, it's the same exact problem that we're talking about earlier, where you have so many talented guys, there are only so many ways to get them on the ball. Where you have this really talented trio of receivers, like you can't go away from that. That's one of the problems that lies here, where you're looking at just this entire collection of talent, and just because of where he is in his development as a true freshman, you really can't justify giving him a bigger role unless something happens in front of him. Where every time you watch Jonah, you say the exact same thing. You say, yeah, that dude deserves more carries. And every time you watch Cam Davis, you say, yeah, for sure. If Jonah wasn't here, I wouldn't be surprised if he was getting all the touches, if he was getting 20, 25 carries a game. That's the thing. That's what I'm saying, where I certainly hear you. And I don't think anything you're saying is wrong. But when you combine that with Giles, who you just talked about, you combine that with Denzel, you combine that with, Jeremiah Hunter, who deserves a whole bunch more targets. That's where the problem lies.
No, you're not. But that's why I said it's coaching, but it's not Scotty Graham coaching. It's Jedd Fisch play calling coaching, because everything is on the table. The three receivers, the three running backs. It's not like, hey, again, the one to Audric should have been to Jeremiah. I love Audric, but if you're going to do that, why not put Jeremiah in that situation or Denzel in that situation? It's all of these things working in tandem to say, look, all the pieces are there, Jedd. Can you pick an identity and a direction? Because here's the thing: Will clearly not throwing over 30 passes a game. That's established. Right. Not that he can't, but I think it's just fair to say. So if you want to run 20, 30, 35 times a game, you clearly can. If you commit to it more, maybe the run blocking gets better, and if you're not confident in the run blocking, throw more. You can get checkdowns, Adam, Jonah. You can do all these different things. But it seems like neither of them is happening. It's like they're both trying to happen, and you're splitting them both, and in the end, nothing is happening.
Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you all every day who's tuning in. And thank you for making Locked On Huskies your first listen of the day. Now for your second listen, you should go check out Locked On College Football. From NIL deals, never-ending conference realignment rumors. Our guy Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football down in the description below, here on YouTube, or wherever else you get your podcast. And with that being said, please make sure you check out Locked On Huskies and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, we're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. Get any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're the only, please, if it's a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on